Today's episode of Morning Coffee with Cameron is brought to you in part by Perfect Circuit. Whether you're after some new headphones, some new studio gear, some boutique Eurorack modules, or just a couple of patch cables, Perfect Circuit has you covered with a massive selection of goodies to add to your collection. If you've got some gear you've got your eye on, you can use my affiliate link down in the description below and enter the code Venus5 at checkout to save 5% and give yourself that excuse you've been looking for to get some new gear. Howdy doody buckaroonies, Dad Stash McCargo Shorts here, back with another hot and sticky episode of Just Add Reverb. Today I wanted to walk you through what I think are 3 of the most essential synth patches that every sound designer should know how to make, and we're going to be walking through all of them using one of my favorite synthesizers, the Novation Peak. The Peak is a pretty powerful sound design platform and a really deep synth overall. It's got a lot of features under the hood, and it's probably my favorite synth I have in my studio. The Peak features FPGA oscillators for amazing virtual analog sounds, but it's also a wavetable synth, so there's a lot of sonic variety in it. It also offers FM, a ton of modulation, and a really deep mod matrix, all complemented by probably some of the best effects I've heard built into a synth. I love this thing a lot, and it served me so well across so many different projects, and I figured in the spirit of sharing the love, why not give one of these away to one of you? Thanks to my super generous friends over at Perfect Circuit, we're teaming up to do a giveaway of one Novation Peak to one of you. If you're a US resident over the age of 18, you can enter the giveaway with the link down in the description below. The giveaway will be live for the next couple of weeks after this video goes out, but if you just can't wait or you found this video after the giveaway ended, you can pick one of these up for yourself from Perfect Circuit with the link down in the description below to not only help support the channel at no extra cost to you, but to make it possible to do more giveaways like this in the future. So a very big thank you to Perfect Circuit for making this giveaway possible. Let's plug this bad mamma jamma in and start making some noise. Synth sound number 1, the acid lead. This is a great foundational sound because I think it teaches you 2 very important lessons. 1, a good sound doesn't need to be complicated, and 2, modulation is everything. The 303 is made up of a square or saw wave, a resonant low-pass filter, and a single envelope that controls everything, so we can really easily recreate that on the Peak. The 303 is actually mono, so one of the first things we're going to do is go into our voice and set that to be mono, so we only get one note at a time. Because we already have the saw wave selected, and now this is mono, we're already a third of the way there. The envelope of the 303 is a little quirky because it only has a decay knob, so we can do this by just having decay as our main control and A, S, and R set to 0. So we've got a nice plucky saw lead sound. The 303 also has an envelope for the filters, so let's use a 24 decibel per octave low-pass filter. Let's set the knob to maybe about 10 or 11 o'clock, increase the resonance to maybe about halfway, and start introducing some envelope depth from this amp envelope. So I'm going to swap from mod envelope to amp envelope, and we'll start increasing the depth. And just like that, we've got our 303 sound. If we increase the resonance, maybe increase the amp, envelope depth, and drop the frequency, and maybe add a bit of filter drive. Maybe we'll go down even lower. We've got our classic 303. By changing the decay time, the envelope depth, the resonance, drive, cutoff, and even the waveform, there's a lot of places you can go from just that one sound. And with the Peak, we have other options like maybe introducing some other features of the envelope, changing to a wavetable or something a bit more complicated to use as the waveform, and of course combining different oscillators to take the sound in any number of other directions. Synth patch number 2, the FM Womp bass. This is another great foundational patch because it teaches you a really classic sound and also lays the groundwork for a lot of other modern and contemporary bassy things. So what we're going to start off with is 2 sine waves for oscillators 1 and 2, decrease the volume from oscillator 1 all the way, and increase the volume all the way for oscillator 2. So oscillator 2 is going to be our output or our carrier, and oscillator 1 is going to be our modulator. To do FM on the Peak, we're going to go into the mod matrix and change our destination. This is going to be FM1 into 2, and we're going to control the depth. That's what's going to make that womp thing. But in order to make this a womp thing, we're going to need to control this. So we're going to use mod envelope 1. Now we'll increase the depth and change the shape of mod envelope 1. Let's increase the decay. That's going to start us off with a nice sort of FM pluck thing. Let's drop down the tuning of the keyboard here. And we're going to increase the attack slightly. And we've got our FM Womp. Expanding on this, we could change the depth for something a bit more subtle or extreme. We can also change the tuning of the oscillators, so let's increase oscillator 1 by 2 octaves, and maybe decrease oscillator 2 by an octave. Now we've got that classic UK bass wompy thing. From here we could do all sorts of stuff like shape the oscillators, or try different waveforms. We could have maybe a saw wave FMing the sine, or maybe use a wavetable. Maybe we could do something like this, and we could have an LFO moving that wavetable around. Get something a little bit more varied. Maybe a slightly more complex wavetable. And of course, shape the output here. And we've got a nice raspy, growly thing. Increasing the FM depth a little more. Maybe adding a touch of filter drive. We've got a more modern, aggressive, dubby bass. Switching over to a triangle wave for oscillator 2 here. One of the nice things about this FM Womp is that it does actually give you the basis of a lot of modern growl basses. What we could do is use a filter with a high pass here with a touch of resonance. We'll drop the frequency down. Kind of find a nice throaty point there, and then use mod envelope 1, which is controlling our FM, to also control the filter cutoff. Maybe we'll go for a saw. Or maybe go back to a sine and change the octaves. You can hear we've got the basis for a lot of modern bass design here. Let's add a tick of reverb. And we've got a nice, fat, aggressive modern bass sound. Last but not least, we have that Blade Runner lead thing. This is arguably one of the most famous synth patches of all time, and it's a good one to save for last, I think, because it builds on everything else we've covered in this video and just expands on a few points. A lot of the synth sounds in Blade Runner came from the Yamaha CS80, which has a pretty distinct sound, so like the 303, the peak isn't exact, but it does get pretty close. What we're gonna do is start off with a single saw wave oscillator. This is going to be a poly patch, so we should have all 8 voices of polyphony active. And we can use this to build up the sound. The Blade Runner sound really starts with the filter, so we're gonna drop our low pass filter down just for more of a nice warm thing. And we're going to increase the filter envelope depth from mod envelope 1. We're gonna drop the sustain, attack, release, and decay all the way down. And we're just gonna start by building up the decay here. We want something fairly long. We're gonna increase the sustain. We're sort of a halfway point. And then we're gonna up the attack ever so slightly. With a touch of resonance. We're almost there. Where the Blade Runner sound starts to come together is introducing a second oscillator. So I'm going to increase the volume of oscillator 2, and we're going to detune these 2 saw waves by just a touch. I'm going to decrease the sustain on the filter envelope here a little bit. And play with the depth until we get something that opens up quite a way, but not all the way. And we're pretty much done. Let's add a little bit of release here. And bring in a whole mess of glorious reverb. Now, this is sounding pretty good. But there's a few more things we can do to really sell this sound. First off, we're going to go into our envelope settings here, and I'm going to increase the velocity sensitivity of the amplitude envelope slightly and increase it a fair amount for the mod envelope, which is controlling the filter. This allows us to get something a little bit more breathing and responsive to our playing. Let's add just a touch of filter drive and maybe a tiny, tiny bit of post distortion here. And if we wanted to expand on the sound, we could even go into our oscillators here and start adding some density to the saws. Finally, we'll go into our mod envelope and we're going to use LFO1 plus and minus or bipolar and tie that to our oscillator pitch with a relatively subtle amount and a fairly high rate. Let's increase that so we can really hear it. Sounding good. Let's go into our oscillators and also go back and turn on key syncing. With a bit more subtle detuning and a little bit of tweaking inside of our oscillators here with the density and detuning. We should be able to get even closer. So let's bring in some delay and reverb, as well as just a touch of chorus, and we should have our Blade Runner lead. Of course, the envelopes are really going to be everything here, so with an even slower envelope and maybe shaving off a bit of attack from the amp envelope, we can not only get a longer Blade Runner-y thing, but even get into the sort of Oberheim brass territory. And there you have it, 3 of the most essential synth sound design recipes broken down using none other than my trusty Novation Peak here. And maybe we'll revisit this type of video in the future with some other foundational concepts and sound recipes to hopefully broaden your horizons a bit, introduce you to some concepts, and help you to get out there to start making your own unique sounds. So that wraps everything up for this one. A big thank you to Perfect Circuit for making this video and the giveaway possible, and of course, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, I hope you learned something, and as always, I hope this inspires you to get out there and make something awesome.